never love again. Something on a broken heart. I learned to be resilient. I wish I were a world apart. I never knew what I was talking about. I know about the news, but I was bottled up. Worst part is I brought this on myself. It's too big, but better to start again. I wish I could break free, back to where I'm supposed to be. I wish I could break free, back to where I'm supposed to be. I'm not in my natural habitat. Sometimes I wanna hit the walls. These boots were walking the beaten path, only until the souls wear off. Whoever knew what I had was good enough. Maybe it was too soon for me to be moving on. Worst part is I brought this on myself. It's too big, but better to start again. I wish I could break free, back to where I'm supposed to be. I wish I could break free, back to where I'm supposed to be.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the ProSoundWeb Podcast Network. I'm Chris Leonard, one of the co-hosts of the Sickle to Noise podcast. With me, I have Russ Long, host of the Front of the House Fridays.
Hey, everybody.
Russ, I think you're listening to our live stream. I can hear it.
You know what? That is not the live stream. That's something else that my computer decided to play.
It's all good. It's all good. So welcome. So if you're familiar with the Sickle to Noise podcast, you've probably heard my voice before. We have other hosts, Michael Lawrence and Kyle Churnside. We talked to a bunch of fun people in the audio industry, some front of house, some monitors, some theaters, some broadcast, sports. We cover it all. So feel free to go, check us out. But today it's not about us. Today it's about Russ and the Front of the House Fridays. So Russ, what is Front of the House Fridays?
Well, during this crazy COVID time, it seems like everybody's stuck at home wishing they were working instead of being out on the road, wishing they were getting to spend more time at home. And just from talking to friends and seeing how anxious everybody is to talk about gear and reminisce about their time on the road, I just thought, man, what a great time to still stay in contact with people and have conversations about gear and touring and invite people to listen in. So the idea was for me to have conversations with people. And during this crazy COVID time, front of house takes on an entirely new meaning. So I'm actually, when I can, I go to somebody's house and in front of their house or behind their house or the side of their house, I have a conversation there with them and we record it and put it out there for people to listen in to.
That's great. And so what do we have in store for us tonight? Who do we have on with us tonight?
Well, this is kind of an extension of Front of the House Fridays, and this is a chance to do a live stream with what I'd call rock stars of audio mixing. And for this first time trying this out, we decided to have Chris Taylor and Robert Bull, who are two amazing engineers. And interesting enough, they're not currently touring. Well, nobody's currently a touring engineer, but they're especially not a currently touring engineer right now. Chris left the road about 16 or 17 years ago to go to work for Yamaha. And Robert Bull left the road, I guess, about 7 years ago when he decided, 5 years ago, to spend more time at home with his family and kind of get away from the travel and everything. But these two guys have worked with the virtual who's who in the touring business. I mean, Chris Taylor has toured with Barbara Streisand, Joe Cocker, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, tons and tons of people. Robert Bull's toured with Martina McBride, Trisha Yearwood, and more recently the Rolling Stones. And interesting enough, these guys toured together with both Jule and Amy Grant. So, and Bull is a longtime monitor engineer. Chris is a longtime front of house engineer. And we kind of wanted to come together to talk a lot about that working relationship between a monitor engineer and a front of house engineer, and how either that is a strong relationship that helps everybody, or maybe not so, depending on the situation.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so I'll start this podcast off with a proper way and just set the record straight that monitors is the best end of the snake. So, Bull, I got your back. We're good. We, just that's what we're clear on that. So,
that's right.
If you disagree, let us know in the comments. But Bull and I are right. So it's all good.
I love the fact that the front of house guys are wearing in-ear monitors. The monitor guys wearing headphones.
Nice. Well, you can decide what you like for which one's the better position, but all I know is everybody has a bad night now and then. If I have a bad night as a front of house engineer, I tell everybody goodbye, climb on the bus, don't ever have to see them again. If I'm a monitor engineer and I have a bad night, I got to see them all on the bus and mix for them again the next night. So I just soon be able to leave those bad nights behind.
Yeah, but don't you think, Russ and CT, don't you think that maybe it's got a little different just because of these? All right, you guys, have to answer to that now, right? We can at least man up and go, yep, you know what, I had a bad night and blah, blah, blah. You guys, you get judged over that microphone. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. There's been people lost their jobs over some mixes on some iPhones that I've heard about.
Yeah, and it's sad because the iPhone isn't known for its capabilities to record bass guitar, and it's sad if that's what costs you your job.
Yeah,
I've seen lighting guys lose it too, and they talk about timing, and you go, timing? You're sitting in the 300 section up there. How do you know what's time to what? It's crazy.
That's right. Well, I kind of wanted to get started by looking at before there were monitor engineers, and I think Chris is the only one who can take us back to those days. But we have a picture of Chris's first PA. Well, tell us about this, Chris.
Well, in the 70s, I decided to go in the sound production business, so I built a PA, and surprisingly, at that point, that was a big PA. That's actually Jim Stafford up there singing on a flatbed truck out in a park someplace. But yeah, I started touring. I did probably with that size of a PA, did 200 shows a year easy with Conway Twitty for about 4 years.
Wow.
And arena shows, right?
Arena shows, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that doesn't look like an arena PA for what you expect these days, but yeah, that's pretty impressive.
But at the time, everybody was putting Shure Vocal Masters columns up to do the same thing.
I like the custom ports on the sides of the box.
Yeah, those are custom tuning ports that I arranged, mainly because I didn't have the money to buy the handles.
But knew you were going to add them later, so
yeah, they came later.
But they're consistent from stage left to stage right, so you're right. Of course,
there. Yeah, I'm married to an interior designer. I have to keep the look
consistent, right?
Yeah.
So Chris, tell us about, you were telling me earlier, which I couldn't believe this, about how multiple acts would tour together and they would each have their own PA.
Yeah, I remember going to a show when I was in the 70s. I used to try to go to shows and see what people were doing. And I went to a show. This is probably the weirdest lineup I've ever seen in my life. It was a local band called Moloch in Memphis, Tennessee, which was kind of I don't even know how to describe it, but I guess it was heavy metal at the time. The second band was a band called Crow. Some people might remember a hit of theirs called Cottage Cheese. It was a biker band. Third band was Bread. Yeah. And that was the lineup for the night. And every band set their own PA up between sets. And there was like different types of PAs and stuff. And I sat there, well, that's pretty wild. You couldn't hear anything, but it was, except for Crow, they were loud. But it was funny to see Crow with this huge big biker guy, and then Bread come up, sing all those little harmonies and stuff. Yeah, it was. I don't know who put that one together, but that's probably the weirdest ones I've ever seen.
Oh, that's great. And so, when did people start to use monitor engineers separate from the front of house engineer doing it?
Well, that's part of the reason that I was working at the time, because I actually had this buddy of mine that was a pretty high tech guy, and he showed me how to make an analog split. And I had actually made a console back in those days that had 4 aux ins on it. So I put one of those at monitor desk, and so you could have 4 monitor mixes on stage, and then front of house console did whatever the front of house did. But yeah, and then pretty soon on, Yamaha came out with a PM1000, and there was somebody, I don't remember the guy's name, who decided to take the bus buttons out and replace them with knobs so that you could have 4 monitor mixes that way. And that's about the best you could get, 4 mixes.
Wow.
Those were the days.
Yeah. Now, how many we got in the Yamaha Con? 72? Yeah. And some people complain about it. That's not enough. So anyway.
Yeah, it's turned it into an entirely different thing. Well, let's step through those photos. If you go to that next photo real quick.
Stand by, sorry.
Well, the thing I love about this next one is it's during Chris's short time as a...
Yes.
Oh, that's not the right one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was good too.
Wait, if that's up there, I'm going to say right now, Chris, if I were going to mix just the lead vocalist, that would be my dream setup right there. Because those consoles sounded so unbelievable. You could turn on each band pass on every channel. So if you didn't want to EQ the mids, you could leave it off and leave it out of the signal chain. And they had the coolest meters as well, right, CT?
Yeah, the meters you could see RMS and peak at the same time on these plasma meters. But there were only 10 of those consoles, and I usually had 2 of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
The famous Claire board. I mean, you toured with it from what year to what year?
I don't know what year I started, probably in the early 80s, but the last tour I did with the Claire board was in 1998. It was a Joe Cocker tour.
Oh, how awesome was that?
Yeah, it's rock and roll.
Yeah,
okay.
man.
Now you can skip that one, please.
Well, the thing I love, though, is you got a guy messing with the mic. It's like you're playing guitar, and it's like, you know what? I don't know why this guy's messing with the mic, but it made sense that you made a transition, because obviously this guy didn't know where to place the mic. So
yeah, he was the music director.
Okay, well, I'm not going to slam him too much then.
Well, is that considered an analog plug-in then?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, go to the next one.
So this is
I don't
so
know.
audio guy here running a video, so bear with me on this one. And the next one being is the Janet Jackson. Is that what you're looking for? Or
You know what? Let's go. I think if it's number 3, it should be right about the year Bull was born.
number 3 is the one we're just looking at mixing on the Claire boards.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that was 3 then. So there's another Claire board is 4. So that's and that Claire board was the most desired console by so many engineers. I mean, that's like a Neve of live sound at the time. Yeah. And I know Gary Brown a few years ago was considering having Claire Brothers rebuild a couple of them so he could take them out with Fish, because the sound is so amazing. Yeah,
you notice the AMS reverb on the top up there. That's up there sitting loose because it had quick release screws on top, so when it didn't work, you could massage it.
Is that a 224 Lexicon?
Probably. That's what I took a lot.
This is awesome.
Yeah, he's got there's one photo that he's got a couple of 1176s in it too.
Yeah. This is Janet Jackson in the Big Egg in Japan. I just wanted to show Bull that I did a stadium show once.
How was that, putting all that stuff up in, is that the Tokyo Dome?
Yeah.
How was that?
It's a large fun.
Yeah. That place, I'll never forget doing a show there. And it was one of those Russ where you said, sometimes you have bad nights. And I had a really rough night. And the sax player looked over at me and he said, Bull, we've been playing this place, and I'll say place being nice, for 50 years. And it's not you. It always sounds this bad. He gave me a hug, and I was like, oh, man, that was really cool. So it was pretty funny.
That's funny. What kind of console is that?
That's a Claire board.
Oh, that's a Claire board too. It didn't look like it had enough angle.
It's probably the way the picture was taken.
All right. So, Bull, what year did you get into the business and start mixing? You know what? Real quick, before you answer that, sorry to interrupt. I should mention that Bull and Chris are both upcoming guests on the Front of the House Fridays podcast. So I've got a full interview with Bull that comes out this Friday, and then Chris's interview will be 2 weeks from Friday. So you'll get a chance to get to know these guys a bit more at that point.
Yeah, if you can't sleep at night, just put that on, and you'll be sawing logs. It'll be great. At least my portion of it. Chris's is actually pretty fun.
They're all good. If you can get past me. Okay, so Bull, talk about your start into the audio mixing world.
I'll say it. I went to Full Sail in '91, and during that time, I thought I wanted to do post production, and I realized that 2 days on a kick drum was just not my cup of tea. I didn't have the attention span of a gnat, hence I'm a monitor guy. And so anyway, I volunteered to do work, and I became a local stagehand down in Florida, and Garth Brooks came through, and his monitor engineer was stupid enough to give me his phone number, Brent Dannon, who we're still really good friends with today. And so when I got out of Full Sail, I just kept calling him, and he finally called me back one day, and he says, "All right, I got a gig, but if I recommend you for this gig, promise me to the Lord above you will please quit calling me." And I said, "Okay." And like 4 or 5 days later, I was 19 years old, and I was on a plane to Japan, and I spent 4 months over there, and I did it was a Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey circus, but it was George Lucas Super Live Adventure. So my job was to sit in front of house. We did the Tokyo Dome and surround sound and Osaka Joe Hall and all those places. And so at the time, it was really cutting edge, but my job was all the sound effects. So I had a keyboard with 3 samplers and a cardboard cut up that sat on top of the keyboards, and it would say grunt or chair break or, whatever, blast or whatever else. And so I had to learn all the choreography because we had live animals involved. And so the tiger could flip out, which they did quite often, and we'd have to stall or do something like that. So I'd have to learn all that, and that's kind of how I started in the business.
That's awesome.
That picture from Janet Jackson was 1990. That was before your time.
So yeah. What year was that George Lucas?
I want to say it was 92, 93, something like that. I will tell you a funny story about that, though, CT. Last time I was at the Tokyo Dome, Dave Natal, he goes, "This crane operator is awesome." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, watch this." And he took a single 18 drum sub, and he made him lift him up from the downstage edge and land it in the back of the stage. And obviously you look, and there's this single 18 just like floating up in this huge crane that they build everything with, takes it over, lands it exactly perfectly. And he looked at me and goes, "Told you."
That's hilarious. So the Stones, I guess that's a good time to quit. I think you doing the Stones, probably the ultimate monitor setup ever. How many wedges, how many mixes did you guys have on that?
The wedges kind of depended just how big the stage was. A normal day was 88 wedges. Tokyo Dome, we do like anywhere between 125 or 132. It kind of depended. That shot was actually the arena tour. They hid me underneath, which was pretty awesome. So if they threw things I could duck, it was pretty great. But they didn't. They were all great. And 24 mixes of wedges and 10 stereo mixes of ears, all done on an analog console. Everything was analog except for the reverb that I used.
And what reverb?
990, Yamaha 990, because it did the 120 beats per, the delay, that 120 delay that it did, and it would do a reverb, and that's what Mick was kind of used to hearing. But if you look at the picture that's up now, you can see every 3 feet there's a wedge, and that's what I mean. It varied, how many wedges you put out every day, just depending on how long the thrust was or how wide the wings were or whatever.
Oh man, that's crazy. And I think I always think of that Seinfeld episode where George Costanza's talking in front of that board meeting, and he says something, everybody laughs, and whether then completely bombed because he's bombed a few times before, he goes, "Thank you, good night," whatever. It's like you're out there, you're touring with the Rolling Stones. That's as good as it gets. All right, good night. I'm gonna go work in an office.
Yeah, I've been toying with it.
I love that photo.
That's kind of a funny photo. That was. They flew in their own planes, but Keith actually flew home on a commercial airline, and so they actually roped off part of the airport for us and had catering and everything else.
Oh my gosh!
So it was we're laughing. We just had a beer together, and McKay's kind of making, well, what do you think there, mate? So yeah, it was really cool.
That's awesome. They even brought catering into the airport. Nice.
They did, yeah. It was really cool.
Never.
But I mean, it's funny. I toured with Martina McBride for 18 years, and she is such an amazing vocalist, but she's even more challenges you to mix. I mean, I don't think I could have mixed the Stones if I wouldn't have mixed her. I mean, she builds confidence and makes you listen to things that, fundamentally, she challenged every night. I mean, she delivered every single night. Every time she opened up her mouth, it was 1,000%. And so, you had to give that too. And I really think learning from her and us learning together, there's no way I could have mixed the Stones, because you just didn't get a lot of feedback from the Stones. You know what I mean? It was the guys did what they did, and you just had to make it right. And with Martina, we would work through things and phasing, and because with her we had 16 wedges out with her when we opened up for straight. So output phasing was a big deal, and how it locked with front of house. And John and I worked really hard together and stuff like that. So it really, she was the school, man, and she was on it. It got to the point once where she says, it just sounds like it's stuck in the box. And I flip phase, and she goes, okay, what's that? And explain it to me. And so then every time she would hear it, she'd just do that, and that meant flip phase. She'd call frequencies. It was great.
So speaking of all that level coming off the stage, in your guys' experience, speaking of the relationship between monitors and front of house, how much of that has been communication with front of house, or front of house back to monitors saying, hey, you're killing me up here. What can you do about this? How do you guys navigate that when the artist is demanding what they're demanding, yet you're still trying to, put a good show out front? How's that go down?
Well, I have to address that, because my first experience with a big show was a friend of mine named Randy Weitzel, and he had been doing monitors for a long time. And he came up to me and told me what he was going to do. He tuned his wedges. I tuned front of house. Then we tuned it together. And he said, never let the band on stage play without the front of house on. And I learned through all that. I thought it was easy. And then Randy went to work at Yamaha, and all of a sudden I was going out with other monitor engineers, and I realized the whole job got a lot harder, because until I actually did a show for Yamaha and Randy was mixing monitors, and all of a sudden, hey, this all got fixed. It's a relationship of, like, even with ears. I know when Bull were out with Jule, he was using a lot of, I didn't realize this, but he was using a lot of audience mics to feed into the ear monitors. And I left for a couple of weeks, and he was telling me that everything was completely different while I was gone. But it's one of those things that you can't do the job without the other guy. And if you don't communicate, you're dead in the water. I mean, you can't fix your job without working with the other guy on the other end of the snake. Either way, monitors, front of house, anything. Because what front of house does completely affects what happens on stage, and this vice versa. If you're using wedges, it's a room sound. Mm-hmm. And if you're using ears, then the front of house affects the monitors, and whatever he does in the ears affects front of house. Because if let's say if a guitar player's playing, if his guitar doesn't sound right in his ears, he's going to change the sound. And so you have to figure all that out. And fortunately, I've had some really, really good luck with some great monitor engineers. And I have to admit that if I've had what success I've had has been dependent on the people I've worked with.
I would agree 100%. I mean,
Sorry, go ahead, Bull. Sorry.
No, not that there's been any great success, but I've been lucky enough to work with John McBride, with Chris Taylor, with Dave Nattell. I mean, it is amazing. And whether it is wedges or ears or whatever, you are feeding off of each other. The energy that you guys are doing, or that we're doing together, it's massive, and the band can feel it. If something's feeding back at 200, and the band likes a little beefier, then you might ask front of house, hey, can you pull some 200 or 250 or whatever, right? But then at that time, you have to give it to front of house. You have to warm up the room in that. If they're going to create the hole, then you have to fix it, and that's that conversation. That's that, or if vice versa. If I'm exciting a room somewhere, then I'll pull it, and then I'll ask CT, hey man, can you give me a little more of that? It's sitting in that frequency range, and it'll just, it'll click together. When it does, it's the perfect golf swing, and I don't even golf.
So Bulda, when you first start with either a new artist or a new front of house engineer, do you have an upfront conversation of, hey, here's how I'm approaching this, or do you guys both do your thing, kind of see where that comes in the middle? How do you typically approach that?
I normally approach it as unless I need to change something. I mean, I would approach it as this. I would say, if there's anything I can do, let me know, right? And we'll work together. And then I'll kind of wait and see where it goes, because I don't want to tell the front of house guy or the guitar player to turn down, or I don't want to inhibit any of that, right? So a lot of times I was telling the guys too, when front of house tunes the PA, I'll go out and listen. I want to go out and hear what the room's doing, what the guys are doing out front, so that I know that I don't excite that part of it, especially when you're doing a boatload of wedges, right? So I think it's important to put yourself in their shoes, so that you can understand what you're doing on stage and kind of, flip it back on stage. But yeah, I mean, I do have the conversation, go, look, I have no ego in this. We're here to make this a complete success. So if there's anything I'm doing, let me know, and we'll just work together to make it great.
Talk about some of the problems you can have if you're not like loading mic pre's down, making gain adjustments because of console issues and things.
Well, I'll tell you one of my experiences early on the Janet Jackson tour. Front of house was feeding back at 5K from the background vocal mics, and they were 20 feet upstage, and the PA was 20 feet in the air, and I was driving me batty. And I called some of the engineers at Claire, and they said, "Oh, those microphones change their polar pattern when they're loaded down with the mic pre." And I've changed the microphones to a transformer couple mic, fixed all of my problems. So microphones are not perfect, and they change according to what they're plugged into. And that's what you kind of have to learn. You listen to it. If it doesn't work, it might work great for someone or some certain situation and never work again for anybody else. I mean, you can't sit there and go, well, I use specifically this microphone for all this stuff. You kind of have to play it by ear. And of course, the musicians have a lot to say about that. Sometimes the best learning experience for me is like when Bull and I were out on Amy Grant's Christmas tour, I would go to the woodwind section and said, where do I put this microphone on your oboe? And they actually appreciated the fact that you bothered to ask.
Right.
And I learned a ton from those guys, because mic in an orchestra is not like mic in a rock and roll band. And we were touring with a huge orchestra, and the mic positions became critical. And when you did it right, the job came easy.
Yeah. And I'm at, along with that, CT, CT had it rough. So Dan Huff is a producer in town, and his dad, Ron, was the conductor. So he would come out every day, and he would challenge Chris, to make it the best that it absolutely could. And along with that, trying to mix monitors for orchestral pianists and, different musicians was very difficult, and mic selection became 100% of it, to make it sound as natural as it could. And that was a point where, you had to check your ego and go, okay, how am I going to mic? Chris, what did we wind up with the piano, the magic mono microphone that finally got Alberto to?
It was a Sony C48, this huge monster thing. We had to duct tape into the piano every day.
And he says, okay, now this is what a piano is supposed to sound like. I mean, I was using Smitty's MIDI keyboard, and I could weld with it, but that's what they wanted. And those were the dynamics that they did. And you just have to adapt with them, and then, work together up front with Chris. Is this going to work with you? And, this is working for so-and-so. And what are we going to do?
And was Ron real heavily involved in that microphone selection stuff as well? Or was that just you guys working it out between the two of you?
Yeah, it was just kind of working it out with mostly with the musicians. And because these guys, they were all in ears. We had a whole orchestra on in ears, and they heard everything.
Yeah.
So it was very important, the positions and what it sounded like. It had to sound real to those guys. And consequently, what they wanted worked, you know.
Yeah.
How about have you ever had a difference opinion on mic placement? Maybe agreed on the mic, but just mic placement. Yeah. So how do you navigate that? Do you end up putting 2 mics on? Do you compromise? How does that go down?
Usually, mic placement ends up being only issues I've ever had with mic placement is usually kick drum, and but in that particular case with the orchestra, the guys that were playing and they were listening to that stuff in their ears, they knew exactly where they wanted the mic. And if you did what they said, it usually worked.
And we did area miking too. So Chris set it up where were they Sound Lab CT?
Yeah, that was in those days. Yeah. Yeah.
So we would have a inside microphone, and then we would do the area miking. And that was, for me, that was it. I mean, that was a secret sauce, because they would want to hear a little bit just for pitch, but they wanted to hear what the section was doing as a whole.
Yeah.
Well, and that's more of a natural way to hear it. I mean, because, theoretically, the best thing is to not mic the orchestra at all, but that's not going to work in an arena.
Right.
And I should point out, you guys had a pretty amazing opportunity or the experience with that, because you toured with an orchestra, and I've done tons of orchestra stuff, but I've never toured with an orchestra. It's always been a different local orchestra, and we've traveled with a conductor or whatever and had rehearsals. But man, going on the road, you didn't have a chance to. I mean, you had to work things out. If it wasn't going to get fixed, then you were going to have to deal with this the entire tour. So it was you had to make sure it was right. And I'm sure that posed a whole lot of challenges and complications to make it all right.
Yeah, so I'll butt in here, Chris, being the monitor guy. So here's the biggest thing: food. These people eat, man, and it is impressive. If there's any, I don't know if there's anybody watching. If there is, you guys are amazing musicians, and I've never seen anybody eat like it. So about halfway through the tour, we were doing like what, Chris? 6 in a row, 5 in a row, and I mean,
something like that.
I don't even remember how many trucks it was. It was big. At the time, there was 2 monitor positions. There were 3 front of house consoles. Digital wasn't out at the time, so it was awesome. But by the 4th or 5th day, you're just numb. You're just walking around on tree legs and tree stumps and whatever else. And so you get done with sound check, and they would go, man, catering. I mean, they were gone. And so then we decided, you know what? There's not a whole lot left for the roadies. So what we decided to do was the people that weren't mixing during the sound check would go get food for everybody. So when the orchestra's on the stage, we'd be eating. They'd be like, "Hey, Bull, can I get a little more of this?" And be like, "Yeah, well, yeah, hold on a minute. We're good. That's really good." So yeah, that was a big thing, man. We had to navigate. If you wanted food, you had to figure out where to get it.
Yeah, and there were some funny things on that tour. That one of the interesting things is that in the contracts there was a temperature that they couldn't play on stage below, and we were playing hockey rinks with ice down, so they had a big thermometer they put on stage. So to keep it above that temperature, they actually put a screw in it so the temperature gauge wouldn't go down far enough. The production manager did that.
Allegedly.
Have you guys ever had to share head amps at all? And maybe not together, but on different tours. And what's that relationship been like between front house and monitors? And trying to, I know you can always have compensation and stuff like that, but there's always typically a starting point.
Well, I did it a lot. I did a bunch of David Foster shows, and Randy Weitzel was the monitor engineer. We toured together for a long time, and our discussion was who had to do it. And I'll always delegate it to the monitor guy, because he's the guy that if you change a head amp gain, he's got that for 30 some odd mixes. With me, it's just 2. And so it's all a matter of having the discussion to say, okay, you know how to do this, don't you? The problem is when you get with people that don't know how to deal with gain structure. That's when people have problems. And when you don't have this communication, like what we're talking about, if you don't communicate, you don't get along or whatever. No, you can't share. But the times I've shared, I've never had a problem.
Well, and even more so now, like with Ravage, you've got a lot of the color is coming from the preamp. And if you're using Silk and transformer emulation, then if you're sharing head amps, you're sharing that color as well. And I think more often than not, the guys who are wearing in-ears are going to notice that it's going to be more pronounced to them than it is to somebody in the audience. So it makes sense that the monitor guy is the guy driving that.
Yeah, and I also think too, for the monitor guy, even if we're not doing the head amps, Chris, if it's not us, I think it's more important to let the front of house guy get it where he needs it to be before you send it to the musicians, right? So present it to them in the best case scenario. When things change, that's when they get nervous.
Of course.
Chris, am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's got to be a good relationship. If it's not a good relationship, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, Bull, I mean, being a monitor guy and being so close to the artists and stuff, how often have you found yourself, you're going to notice things from the artists or musicians sooner in terms of their where their headspace is at for the day and stuff like that? How much of that do you feel like you ever have to communicate to the front of house guy, like, hey, I'm feeling this today, this is happening. What's that like?
So, all right, Chris, I'm gonna let it out there. So when we did the Amy Grant thing, it was Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, and CeCe Winans. And CeCe Winans would sing "Oh Holy Night," and I promise you, there was not a dry eye in a 20,000-seat arena or a 100-piece orchestra. I mean, it was the most amazing thing. It was unbelievable. She could clip a capsule holding it this far away, and so she would always come out with this little towel that would somewhere. I called it the Holy Spirit towel, and when she was going, her hands would start doing this, and she'd put it behind her back. And I'd call out front of house. I'm like, boys, hold on to your gain knobs. The Holy Spirit is fixing to come out. I mean, spirits of fire. I mean, we are fixing to get some "Oh Holy Night." We get done with that, all you hear from front of house was, whew. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, and, likewise with John, with Martina, he's like, hey, your voice is a little bit here, being married to her or whatever. But yeah, I do. And I think it's whether it's front of house, and I'm going to tell on Chris again on this one, or monitors, you're the whoopee, right? You're the blanket. You show the calmness to get them out of that headspace. One of the other things we did on the Amy tour was there were so many different microphones coming in and out. I was doing RF at the time. I would announce when the microphones were on. And so I would say, because in the ears they would get froke out, past tense of freak is broken, whatever. And so they'd all get froke out. And I'm like, okay, Smitty's mic's hot, right? And then it was Cece's mic is hot. And we all had these squawk boxes. And so every night before Breath of Heaven, Amy would come out. I'm like, Amy's vocal's hot. Or I'd say Amy's hot or whatever else. And so she had bent down one night to get some flowers from a little girl. And she unplugged her ear monitor belt pack. And so but the next day we got called into the dressing room. And me and CT, and I thought, well, I'm going home. I was whatever, you're getting called to the principal's office, right? And she goes, well, hey guys, how's it going? I said, good. She goes, I got a couple things. First of all, Bull, it's very flattering that you think I'm attractive, but a lot of people can hear that through the speaker. And I said, I just kind of hung my head. I said, I'm sorry, Amy, I'll use different verbiage. It means your vocal is on. So that Chris Schutze at the time could tell you that your vocal's on in your ears and you could go out on stage. And she goes, the second thing is, I unplugged my ear monitors last night and I loved it. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I'm really talented. That's great, And she goes, I love singing to the room. She goes, it sounds the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Would you two be okay if I just sang off a front of house because I love what I hear? And I said, Amy, I just lost about 128 cues. I'm completely okay with it. Chris, how about you? It's on you, buddy boy. And she did. She sang the rest of that tour with she would wear an earplug if she had a hard time hearing.
Wow.
Other than that, she would just sing to the room, and it was amazing.
She always makes. I mean, I toured with Amy for a long time as well, and she would have the monitor engineer shut off her monitors every once in a while. She would talk to me after the show, and she'd go, "Man, it's a great sounding show tonight." I go, "You have some friends there?" And she goes, "No, I had them turn the monitors off, and I listened to it. It was really," and that makes. having an artist tell me they listened to your mix during the show is about the most unnerving thing I can ever imagine.
Yeah, pass the baton, and you only had like 100 and some inputs out front. So I was like, heck yeah, I can concentrate and make fun. I can sing off key to the guys on the stage even better now. I can get more of a shtick going. So that was always fun too. They would sing the different Christmas songs, and I would do animal noises in their ears. Because, you know, after 20, 30 shows, the rhythm section was kind of bored. So I kind of kept it along, and I would sing just slightly off key in their ear monitors. Once Amy gave the reins, I was like, oh, it is on. You know, it's great.
Well, I've heard so many people talk about what a great monitor engineer you are, Bull, and sometimes I think sometimes it's based on how much you make them laugh. They'll always, man, he's a great monitor engineer. He's always singing stuff into our ears.
Yeah,
that makes him good. I mean, I know he's good, but
yeah, I mean, whatever it takes, and you know, we're not saving babies. I mean, it's how blessed are we to be able to get to do what we do. I mean, the lights go down, and you get to help somebody hopefully have a 3 hours or 2 hours of forgetting about all the stuff that's going on, and you're lucky enough to be a part of that. Why not have fun with it? You know, I just got the biggest kick out of it, and you know, the musicians always made sure they felt a part of it, and you know, just that symbiotic thing, and like with Chris, you know, especially on Jule, I mean, he was as much of a band member as anybody. I mean, if CT wasn't staying at the hotel that the band was at, they didn't stay there. Period. The crew. I mean, that's the truth. We were in Italy, and Jule had put them up at some fancy hotel, and they're like, "Where's Chris and the crew at?" And they're like, "Well, they're down the hill." And they're like, "Yeah, you can go ahead and move us." I mean, and so, you know, when you can build that relationship, it's like I said, it's the perfect golf swing. It really is.
And
So,
Jule,
go
Chris,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Jule was your last tour, right? Before you went to work for Yamaha?
Yeah, I left that tour. I mean, Jule was an interesting thing. I mean, she was an interesting lady, and the band was spectacular, and they were willing to do anything that we asked. The whole stage was totally silent, and Bull did ear monitors for everybody. No guitar amps, you know, it was all up there, but it wasn't working. And one of the biggest compliments, because the hardest problem with doing in-ears or silent amps, to my opinion, being an ex-guitar player, is guitar sounds. And I know that directs don't ever sound as good as a mic speaker. And the fact that these guys understood that, and I explained to them that, you know, that they take a solo with a microphone, as I turn that solo up, I pick up all the ambience around with the microphone, not just guitar solo. And we did, 6 months of this tour, and the band goes, we want to try wedges. And both Bull and I go, hey, we'll go for it. And after the show, they came back and said, don't ever let us do that again. Said, we can't hear anything. Our ears are ringing. Don't ever let us do that again. And we said, okay, you know, but it was the whole band and crew. It was a team. You know, we wanted it to be silent stage. And after a while, they got tired of it. But we said, go ahead, try it. You know, if it works, it works. But and we had some really great shows. And actually, she's the first artist I've ever worked for that actually made the crew get up on stage and play with her. We played Red Rocks, and she said, well, we're going to play a song together. And she actually called me in from front of house to play on stage in Red Rocks. And the band left, and it was all the crew guys, and she stayed up there and sang a song. It was like,
That's
I've
awesome.
never had that happen before.
She's like, don't suck. And we said, okay. And the keyboard player at the time was original member of Mr. Mister. He went down and did monitors. You know, the drum tech got up and played drums, and the drummer Trey was teching for him. I mean, they all and they were proud to do it. You know what I mean? It was, everybody wanted to do it. It was just that was it. And it was, you know, there were rough nights. You know, there were nights when, you know, because everything is direct and there was no place to hide in monitors, you know, but we all knew it was worth it, you know, especially after what CT was saying, you know, after that one show of, well, I was like, wedges, I'm going to melt your face with wedges so we don't do this again. And I mean, but you know, whatever you want to do, man, you want me to make it rain, I'll take a rain stick, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. But yeah, it was definitely, that was our one chance to go, all right, let's beat this out of them real quick. And yeah, it was good.
Yeah. But as far as the relationship, the relationships with monitors in front of house is the most important relationship sound guys have. I mean, they've got to work together. They've got to do this. And also with the musicians. And one thing, I've had guys come up to me and they ask me what you do and this, that, and the other, setting up. And I said, if you get the opportunity, go to rehearsals. Don't set up anything. Don't mic anything. And sit in the middle of the band and listen to what they want it to sound like before you even put a microphone on anything. Do a couple of days of just sitting through rehearsals and then start putting things in place to create what they're doing on stage out at front of house. And that has helped me the most. And then I've had people come up like, well, actually, Jule asked me to come out after I'd worked for Yamaha and talk to her front of house guy. And he had all of these things on her channel, multi-band compressor and all these things like that. And he was having trouble with her vocal because she has a huge dynamic range. And he asked me what I did. And I go, high pass filter. I said, I'm sorry, but you've got to learn the songs. When she sings loud, you turn it down. When she sings quiet, you turn it up. There's not anything that's going to do 15 dB of vocal reduction for you.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the biggest thing I can tell anybody about mixing front of house. Learn the music.
Yeah.
When I went to work for Michael Jackson, I spent 2 weeks in hotel rooms with headphones on, listening to every glass break that existed. And some bands are easy because you listen to their music. I didn't listen to his music, but I learned every little thing. And moving from arenas to stadiums was another big experience. I missed every cue for the first week. And before I realized I was 175 feet away, they already played it before I heard it.
Yeah.
So I had to start learning how to anticipate cues, by 200 milliseconds or so. And that was a hard change. I mean, every move that you make is a change, and most of the changes that you need to adapt to monitors front of house are not technical changes. They're physical changes or physics changes that you need to make. Learning the music, learning the situation you're in. Those are more important than all of the plugins and all of the digital things that you can do as an engineer. I mean, it's a artistic thing, not a technical job.
And, speaking about working together, I mean, there were nights, whether it was Amy or, Jule or whoever you're working with, where you could see they were singing off the microphone and, the guys out front are struggling. So, turn it down. If you can get by with it, we're not talking about, 3-5 dB. It can just be a 1 dB, and you have to kind of Barney Fife them. You got to give them what they want at the beginning, and then you can kind of Barney Fife them at the end, and you can honestly just see them that they're not even trying to, and working together with things like that, especially when they're uncomfortable or their voice, they say it's not working well that night or anything like that. And you say, man, I got you. There's times when you could pull the vocal back and then turn their outputs up, right, so that their levels stay the same, but they're wanting more vocal and they're bringing it closer. And all those little things are musical, and those are helping your brother at front of house, and that's invaluable.
Yeah, and it's so noticeable at front of house when somebody's doing that or not. And I mean, it's it becomes clear real quick. And it's not that they're intentionally trying to work against you, but some people just don't understand what a team effort it is, I think.
Yeah. And some days are better than others. Look, some days you're going to get by with it. Some days you're going to get busted, but at least take a swing at it.
Yeah, I think, so one of the things we talk about on the Signal to Noise podcast often is that relationship. We talk about often like the front of house engineer and the monitor engineer to the artist, in that, we're here to, they already have a vision and an art of what they want to put out there, right? We're just here as vessels to then translate as a medium out to the audience, right? And so if you don't understand where it is they're trying to go, where they're coming from, you're going to get in the way. This is not about us. It's not our mix. It's not our show. We're trying to translate the experience that they want. Sometimes it might give us liberty, to put our flavor, our touch on it. But at the end of the day, if I'm inhibiting what it is that they're trying to convey, you're doing something wrong. So I love the fact that we've titled this relationship, right? Because it's relationship with manager, with the artist. It's such a central word to the work that we do. And it's, nobody's better than anybody. And we're all here to invoke emotion out of an experience out of people, right?
Yep.
We're a part of delivering that medium, and getting in the way of that is just wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting too, to have trust with everybody. There was one time I was really struggling for it's probably a week and a half with Martina, and we had just a string of awesome shows. And she's like, something has changed. She goes, I know the way you mix, something's wrong, something's changed. And I said, Martina, I haven't done anything. I promise, it's the same. Well, I'd gotten a new microphone with a new capsule on it, and the capsule was actually shorter. So the rejection you can say all the technical terms, it was different. And she could hear it. And I went back to the old, I said, well, this is the only thing I've changed. This is new. It's supposed to be better. And I went back to the old capsule, and immediately she sang through it, and she goes, thank you. But she didn't fire me. She could have. I mean, she was really getting frustrated and different things like that, but she dug in because she had trust, and she knew that I wasn't going to give up and she wasn't going to give up. And I think you have to have that, with your musicians as well as, your front of house mixers. We're going to have bad nights. I mean, we were in Worcester, and Natal had Aerosmith out front, and he absolutely annihilated me. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, the low end that came on stage, and they did an after show party that night, and the band was frustrated. And they were saying, man, the monitors were really rough tonight. And he said, no, it wasn't. And they're like, what are you talking about? He goes, I had Aerosmith out there. He goes, I was killing you guys. He goes, there's no way that a 12-inch speaker can make that amount of low end. I don't care what you say. It's physically impossible. It was all me. I mean, he totally jumped on the sword. I mean, it was the truth, Dave. But that's the kind of relationship. The first time I turned the vocal mic down to Jagger, all the lights go off. He thought I was landing something. What'd you do? I go, well, I turned it down a little bit. He's like, keep doing that. And I said, Dave, you got to give me a minute to fake the guy out, or at least get him comfortable, to where he's at. But those were the things you kind of learn together. Chris really helped me on Jule's vocals. She was tough in monitors, man. She would call you out over the microphone in front of the audience and let you have it. And there were times where I just couldn't find that, whatever it was. And I'm like, Chris, can you give me some Judy Garland at front of house? Which is him and I call the top end, and he would put just a little sweetener on it. She's like, there it is. And I didn't do anything, you got to have it.
So I'm curious, some of the experience of tours I've done in Monitor World, we always had a backup left-right mix. Is that something you guys have ever had to do, or have you ever had to actually go to it?
I have, yeah. I actually did. We had I think it was a stage rack went down. And no, you know what? I think it was McBride's Paragon. And so we did a left-right with a vocal. And so that way they could just holler at me. It's only happened once or twice, but yeah, we always had that.
And was that something that the front house guy ever checked on to see what it would look like if ever had to go to it, or was it something that's kind of create? Yeah, I mean.
Oh no, absolutely, yeah. It was, we'd go through it, and the band would play, and John or whoever would just check it and go, hey, guitar's a little out here, whatever. But at least when you do the switch, and checking your gain structure, so we did switch between the two. It wasn't right to stun, go to plaid.
Yeah, I don't remember doing that on tours so much, but I've had consoles go down in the show. I mean, and before shows. Fortunately, I've known enough to get them back working. I was on Janet Jackson. I walked out to put the house music on, and every light on the console came on, and the whole thing went dead. And that was the Claire board. And fortunately, the way they designed that is that they have multiple power supplies, and all of them are identical with different taps for the voltage. And I was able to steal the power supply off the lights on the console and put it on the audio and retap it. I didn't have any lights or meters, but I had noise. So yeah, things like that happen all the time. And it has to do with the products. A lot of times the products you're using, some consoles fail more than others. And obviously nowadays in the digital world, there's many ways that you can crash a console, and so I don't think I would go out on tour now without that. But fortunately, I've never had to go to it.
Well, Murphy's Law makes it to where if you're ready for it, you're not going to have a problem. But if you're not ready for it, it's when you're going to have issues. And that's, I mean, I think you're unwise to not prepare in every way possible for a disaster. But at the same time, you can't stress about it around the clock. But you need to be ready for it. You need to know, have a plan if the console has to be rebooted during a show, and or if if whatever goes out, you need to know how you're going to work around it.
Yeah. Well, most of my big tours were in the analog days, and I had multiple consoles. So it was just a matter of patching the things you wanted to hear into the console that was working. Chris,
I would love to get your feedback on, because I know you were such a lover of the Claire board, and it did such a nice thing to analog sources to drums, and was such a, I mean, to me was the Rupert Neve console of live sound, and then you were real instrumental in bringing Rupert Neve in to be part of the Rivage, the most recent the flagship Yamaha console now. And I guess just tell me your sonic impression of how the comparison between Rivage and the Claire board.
Well, I've always been a fan of transformer coupled consoles since that's what I started on. Transformers have a unique effect on percussion stuff, in particular, drums, things like that. And I like that distortion that it added. It was, like the reasons that we sometimes, I know that a lot of engineers use really bad reverbs on drums because they want that nasty verb sound. I've always enjoyed having that transformer coupled input. And during the process of working on Rivage, we were discussing plugins. And during the process, we were going, who do we want to do plugins? And Rupert Neve's name kept coming to the top of the list every time, but everybody says, well, he doesn't do this. And he's never done it before. And I was kind of curious. I said, well, why don't we just ask him? And they go, okay, ask him. Maybe he'll show up at a trade show. I said, I doubt it. He lives in Texas. And they didn't even know that the Japanese people didn't know much about Rupert Neve. They didn't know he lived in Texas. And I have a really good friend that owns a mobile truck that's real good friends with Rupert Neve. And I called him up and I said, you set up a meeting. So we went down and had a meeting with him. And so during the process, he'd agreed to work with Yamaha. And this Toshifumu Kunamoto, who we call him Dr. K, he's brilliant. He's a jazz pianist. He knows sound. And he's a brilliant technician. And he's created this thing called virtual circuit modeling. So he'll take the schematic diagram and create a digital version of that. And then he will go back and listen to it and make it sound like the original product. And during this process, he was emulating a Rupert Neve transformer. And so he would send stuff to me and I would listen to it. And I wrote back to him. I said, this EQ is really good, but this other stuff over here is great. I love this stuff. The transformer emulation and the transformer hysteresis and the second and third harmonic distortion, all the stuff that he created for Rupert Neve to create the sound that he wanted. I said, can we have this? And they were reluctant, but I actually created some tracks that I mixed without it, then added it and sent it to them and let them listen to it. And they decided they would do this on the front side. So to me, I love that little transformer button on the console. It brings me back to the Claire board days in my mind of what a kick drum and a snare drum is supposed to sound like, and not having to add compression and all of the stuff because the hardest thing for me moving from analog to digital was that I couldn't get the sounds I was used to without a lot of work. I never compressed a kick drum or snare drum in my life in the analog world. But once you get into the digital world, you have to. And you have to create those sounds. And I had a hard time for a long time making that transfer. Digital gates just lower the volume. And analog gates had noise in them. Yeah. But I realized that I used to use the noise for part of my tom sound when I was gating toms. And so I had to relearn how to mix it for a while. And going back to the Rivage, they give you both ways. The Rivage allows you to add this transformer emulation and distortion that some of us are used to having, or turn it off and have a just straight digital clean console, which I have to admit, when I was doing orchestras, I love that. Well, I love having a digital console mixing an orchestra, because you put a $1,000 microphone into one of those channels, it sounded really, really good. And so that's kind of the story that all came about, is that just to try to recreate the analog days into a console.
That's great. I mean, I think when we're looking back at talking about these old tours and the analog gear that was used to make so many of them sound so great, that it's great to kind of see how it's come back around again. And there's finally an answer in the digital world that I think is achieving that result that we loved about the analog,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know you guys are all sitting around staring at my shirt, wondering what in the world I'm wearing this for. If you are wondering, this is a shirt from a group called The Clinic, a roadie advocacy group. I know none of you are asking this, but I want you to know about it. Paul and Courtney Clemson, who are a great couple who are dedicating their lives right now to creating a group that financially and psychologically helps roadies with their needs. And they've really been able to help a lot of people out right now during this coronavirus time. But if you get a chance, check it out, www.theroadieclinic.com. And they're a great organization, great people. And man, I'm excited to be wearing the shirt. Do we have any questions or anything we need to be looking at?
No, just comments of just that people just agreeing we're going nice discussion, stuff like that. So no, I mean, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in real quick before we kind of wrap up here. But yeah, so I got to bring a little bit of the signal to noise flavor into this. So I'll start with Bull. Where is your favorite place to eat on the road?
Well, I mean, you can look at me. I have a lot of them. I mean, it costs a lot of money to have this figure. Oh my gosh, man! The Wolf Lodge, Dantana's, Maestro's, the Carney's. They're John's Pizza on 44th in New York City. It's an old church. I love that, the mozzarella pizza there. And by the way, if you do go there and you get the mozzarella wedges, and they tell you that you can't get a full gravy boat of marinara, they're lying, because you can. So yeah. But quite a few places, depends on where you're at.
Chris, how about you?
Well, I thought I'd eaten in a lot of really great places, but I became a fan of, with my buddy Randy Weitzel, I have to mention once in a while, of sushi. And I thought I'd had good sushi till I went to work for Yamaha. And to go to Japan and have the Japanese engineers take me around to some of their places to eat, there's been some pretty spectacular meals that I've had with my trips to Japan working for Yamaha, and plus a few when I was touring over there too. But I have to say, can't think of any names of any places, because I just kind of ended up following them around, and I don't know what their names are anyway. But there actually is. There was during the whole process of creating the Rivage console, there was 4 of us, and we went to this place called Noppo, which is in Japanese for tall man, and it's meat on a stick. I mean, I don't even know what all the meats they were, but they just bring this meat on a stick, and we would go there every time. It would be the first email that you would get before you were having a meeting there. They would say, okay, how many people? Because it was a really small place, so you had to limit the number of people. So whoever signed up first got to go. But that's a really good place. I actually, when my wife went back with me one time, that's the first place we went. She loved it too.
And I have eaten there 3 times, I got to say, and it's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, well, please check out the Signal to Noise podcast. We like to joke and say we're a taco podcast that happens to talk about audio, but you can't, we like to have a lot of fun. We like to say, Signal to Noise podcast is more like, sitting at Denny's after the gig or the back of the tour bus after the gig and just having a conversation, kind of relax. And sometimes we get nerdy, sometimes we talk about food. It's a mix all around. So also please check out Front of the House Fridays. It comes out every Friday, hence the name. It kind of makes sense. I know this is Tuesday, but hey, we have Friday to look forward to, right? I mean, that's what it's about.
Thanks for having us on, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. Take care, guys.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.